Adult versus child bilingualism differences. Now, to sum up our discussion that we have done until now, we need to remember that at times children do appear to be better bilinguals and more proficient users of L2, primarily because their communicative needs are simpler. They don't need to sort of use the language that they have learned for more complex functions. For example, they don't need it to persuade others. They don't need it to negotiate business deals. They don't need to read complex materials where language definitely becomes more complex and more carefully choices regarding the use of certain vocabulary or certain structures have to be made. So it might appear to us that the children are more proficient than the adults. And then we have to remember that if we compare the opportunities given to the children to learn the language, then these appear to be more available for them. They are provided visuals, people pay specific attention to their language learning. It is assumed and it is well understood that they need the time to learn the language. So they are not in a rush to gain a certain kind of proficiency. So, for instance, if you are doing a course as an adult to learn a language at a center, you are somehow pushed through different stages very quickly because it is only a 6-month course or it's a 2-month course. And even if it were a longer course, which is highly unlikely, then even you don't have the time to invest it just in language learning because of the pressures of the work. While the child is at leisure, he's watching cartoons, watching television, interacting with peers who already might have that language, reading our books. So the child definitely has much richer resources to learn the second language. And of course, the expectations from the adults are different. They are expected to be there rather quickly, not to make mistakes. If the children are making mistakes, you ignore them, you sort of correct them. If adults are making mistakes also, even if you don't laugh at them and you don't ridicule them, it is more difficult for anyone to correct the language structure that an adult is using incorrectly. More often than not, we let go of the language structure and just as long as we get the meaning that the adult is trying to convey in this new language, we just accept it. So this also at times demotivates the adult learners to learn the new language or learn the language to the kind of proficiency that we push our children to learn. Adults have much more complex communicative needs. For instance, if you are learning a language, as it happens in pursuing a degree with Erasmus, you have not only to learn the language within a given time, you have to use that language for a fairly complex purpose and to use it for cognitive understanding and to express your cognitive thinking. So it is much more complex. And then learning is less supported. There is this urgency to quickly learn the language and move on to using it, which the children do not have. And then there is definitely more language anxiety because there is less leisure to take up time and become proficient and use the language. Then also there is also the case of motivation. So it is has to do with the kind of motivation that adults bring to the learning of the second language that would matter more for them rather than children who have to accept whatever comes to them. They just do it as a part of the schoolwork or as a part of what they're learning from their outer context. Over here, the adults need to really commit themselves, pay a lot more attention to the kind of input that is coming to them from their own context. And if I'm talking about the use of language in the context of the adults also, please remember that the kind of input that comes to the adults might not be the kind of the standard language input that you give to the children in schools, because all of us also in Pakistan also, when we are using Urdu, it's not the kind of Urdu standard language that we are using in our academics. It's a lower level type of Urdu that we use in our common communication. There is less evidence for this critical period, and there is, however, evidence that children do better with accent, and this accent might have to do with the critical age. So there are several problems in learning the second language in adulthood, but they do not pertain to their inability of learning the second language. So we are only saying that they might have less competence in the accent because of this neurological functions of the brain and the way certain pathways in the brain are set, and it's not easy to sort of dislocate them. In any case, proficiency in different L2 skills might also be different or similar depending on, the effort that is put in. So the adults might be better in reading and writing skills within a given language. Children might be better in listening and processing the information. And as we discussed earlier in the modules, the ability of bilingualism it relates to the functions that you put certain languages to.